August 8, 1941, 14:15 hours. The Belaya border region, USSR. The sun beats down mercilessly on the cracked edges of the trenches, and the air is thick with the sickly sweet stench of cordite mixed with rotting earth. 24-year-old Red Army Private Lyudmila Pavlichenko lies prone behind a crumbling parapet, her right index finger resting tensely against the trigger guard of her Mosin Nagant rifle. Less than 50 meters away, two German soldiers are crouched low, using the sparse brush for cover as they attempt to infiltrate the Soviet flank. Lyudmila forces her breathing to slow. Every rise and fall of her chest is microscopic. Her gaze is locked, dead center, on the crosshairs of her scope. This is her 4th month in the service and the true beginning of her life as a hunter. Suddenly, a German MG-34 machine gun spits fire. A hail of lead rips through the dirt inches from Lyudmila, sending plumes of dust into the air. Her comrade, Dmitry Kravchenko, pops up to spot the enemy and is instantly struck in the shoulder. Blood splatters across Lyudmila's cheek. The warmth of the blood sends her mind into a momentary blank, only to be replaced by a cold, searing instinct. As Dmitry writhes in agony, the German gunner begins to reload. This girl, once a history student at Kiev University, who should have been flipping through ancient manuscripts in a quiet library, now holds the lives of 2 men in her hands. Before this moment, she had never pulled the trigger to take a life. But the German tide is rising. The defensive lines toward Odesa are crumbling, and the Soviets are outnumbered by a desperate ratio of 3-1. The world around her is a deafening roar of artillery. Every second, a soldier falls. Lyudmila feels a pressure unlike any other, a tightening grip of death around her throat. She adjusts her breath. Her left hand steadies the wooden handguard, centering the reticle on the German soldier as he racks his bolt. In this heartbeat, time stands still. She knows if she misses, she is exposed, and the wounded Dmitry is a dead man. Closing her left eye, she stares through the optic. She sees the insignia on his collar. She sees his chest heaving with the frantic breath of combat. The trigger is squeezed. With a sharp crack, the recoil of the Mosin Nagant slams hard into the hollow of her shoulder. That was the first notch in Lyudmila's legendary career. The girl who once couldn't bear the sight of a slaughtered animal underwent a soul-shattering transformation that afternoon. There is no time for grief, for more German silhouettes are appearing on the horizon. This skirmish is merely the overture, the epic beginning of how Lady Death was forged. In the months to follow, her name would become a recurring nightmare for the German infantry. But for now, amidst the smoke and blood, she simply cycles the bolt, ejects a searing hot casing, and chambers the next round, hunting for her next target. Let's turn back the clock to the summer of 1941, when Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa. A wall of fire instantly consumed the peace of the Western Soviet Union. Lyudmila Pavlichenko, a small-town girl born in Tserkov, Ukraine, was in Kiev dreaming of becoming a scholar. However, on the morning of June 22nd, the roar of Junkers bomber engines shattered everyone's fantasies. Kiev's railway stations, warehouses, and residential areas were reduced to rubble. Lyudmila witnessed her neighbor's house collapse in an explosion and heard the heart-wrenching screams from beneath the ruins. In that moment, the logic of a history student was entirely replaced by raw fury. Unlike other girls who chose to serve as nurses in the rear, she marched straight into the recruitment office and demanded to be an infantryman, a soldier who could carry a rifle into battle. The recruitment officer looked dismissively at the sweet-faced girl in the floral dress. He told her that women were better suited for bandaging wounds. But Lyudmila pulled her Voroshilov sharpshooter certificate from her pocket, a testament to her relentless practice at a local shooting club in her spare time. She couldn't just shoot, she was a marksman. She told the officer she didn't need sympathy, she only needed a rifle. Eventually, she was assigned to the Red Army's 25th Infantry Division. This unit would later be decimated during the defense of Odessa, losing half its strength, but Lyudmila survived. The early days of her service were grueling and unglamorous. There were no romantic sniper duels like in the movies, only endless trench digging and crawling through freezing mud. Lyudmila lived and ate alongside the male soldiers, marching through the rain under the weight of heavy gear. Her instructor was a hardened veteran who told her, "On the battlefield, you are not a woman. You are a precision instrument designed solely to eliminate the enemy." To harden her resolve, Lyudmila once lay in ambush at the front lines for 6 straight hours without food, refusing even to brush away the insects crawling across her face. Her body was adapting to this inhuman rhythm, and her senses were becoming lethally sharp on the edge of death. August 1941. The defense of Odessa reached a fever pitch. The German 11th Army was strangling this vital Black Sea stronghold with overwhelming firepower, carving Soviet positions into isolated islands. It was during the fighting near Belaya that Lyudmila faced her true baptism by fire as a sniper. Lacking automatic weapons, Soviet marksmen had to ensure every single round claimed a life. At the time, a German sniper in the sector had already picked off several Soviet officers, dragging morale down to a freezing point. The battalion commander sought out Lyudmila with a grim order: "Pull this thorn from their side." Lyudmila chose the most primitive and most lethal approach. Armed with an ordinary, uncalibrated Mosin Nagant, she crept into the no-man's land between the trenches under the cover of night. She chose a charred, shattered tree stump for cover, camouflaging herself as a pile of rubble. For an entire night, she didn't move a muscle. As the morning mist burned off the next day, she began scouring the German lines. The enemy sniper was a professional, expertly tucked into the shadows to exploit the sun's glare. Lyudmila studied the flight patterns of birds and the sway of the weeds, gradually narrowing down his position. It was a duel of psychology and sheer endurance. As the sun climbed higher, sweat stung her eyes, but she didn't dare wipe it away. Finally, around 10 a.m., perhaps due to a cramp from the long vigil or a momentary lapse in caution, the enemy shifted ever so slightly. It was a microscopic movement, but it caused a few dry leaves on his camo netting to flutter. Lyudmila didn't hesitate. She quickly calculated the windage, shifting her aim 2 millimeters to the left. She squeezed the trigger, and a faint flash spat from her barrel. Through her scope, she saw the German's helmet snap back violently as he tumbled from the brush. Lyudmila didn't retreat immediately. She held her position, waiting to ensure no second shooter was zeroing in on her. News of the kill rippled through the Soviet trenches, and for the first time, Lyudmila's name was whispered alongside the word hero. But to her, it was simply number 1 on a growing tally of death. As the battle progressed, Lyudmila realized that traditional Soviet sniper doctrine carried a fatal flaw. At the time, the Red Army advocated for fixed outposts and passive waiting, snipers staying in preset concealed bunkers, waiting for the enemy to appear. While effective against ordinary infantry, this was a death sentence when facing Germany's highly aggressive counter-sniper teams. The Wehrmacht would use mortar batteries for area saturation or deploy 3-man teams, one to draw fire as bait while 2 others flanked the position. Lyudmila decided to rewrite the rules. She shifted to proactive hunting, developing a dual-point decoy tactic. Working with an observer, she would set up a mannequin dressed in an old uniform and stuffed with straw at one position, using thin wires to manipulate its movements from a distance. When the German sniper took the bait and revealed their position, Lyudmila would deliver the killing blow from her real ambush point 30 meters away. It was a high-stakes gamble. If the ruse was spotted, she would face the full, unbridled fury of enemy retaliation. During a battle to hold the heights outside Odessa, Lyudmila used this tactic to eliminate 4 German NCOs in just 2 hours. Enraged, the German commander ordered a platoon of combat engineers to demolish any potential hiding spot. But Lyudmila had already anticipated their move. She retreated to an abandoned bunker further back, using its narrow firing slit to name tag the German lead officer. This style of actively seeking out windows of opportunity, rather than being tethered to a fixed position, allowed Lyudmila's confirmed kill count to blow past the 100 mark in just 2 months. German radio broadcasts began engaging in psychological warfare against her, branding her the demon woman of Odessa. Meanwhile, the Soviet propaganda machine realized the symbolic power of this young woman. But to Lyudmila, the propaganda was a phantom. Only the cold steel of her rifle and the crosshairs in her scope were real. However, war is never just about victory. Amidst the ruins of Odessa, Lyudmila lost many of her comrades. Anna Morozova, the girl who always shared half her black bread, had her legs shattered by a grenade during a countercharge. Viktor Stepanov, her loyal partner, was riddled by heavy machine gun fire while drawing heat for her. Lyudmila didn't cry. Instead, she grew increasingly silent, her eyes turning cold as ice. She began frequently volunteering for the most perilous missions, even slipping into German camps at midnight for unsanctioned decapitation strikes. Her tactics became more ruthless, more efficient. She wasn't just killing men, she was dismantling their will to fight. She would intentionally wound a German soldier in the thigh, waiting for others to rush to his aid, only to harvest them one by one. In the meat grinder of a total war, this cold-blooded method was the fastest way to bleed the enemy of both numbers and morale. Lyudmila knew deep down, mercy to the enemy was a betrayal to her brothers in arms. October 1941, Odessa fell. Lyudmila retreated with her unit to Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula. There she would face the most grueling, bloody, and legendary 8 months of her life. The combat shifted from tug-of-war on the plains to a lethal game of hide-and-seek among mountains, caves, and urban wreckage. Her adversaries were no longer just regular Wehrmacht troops, but elite German Jaegers and master instructors handpicked from the Berlin Sniper School. The final showdown for Sevastopol was about to begin. Lyudmila Pavlichenko, with her Mosin Nagant slung over her shoulder, marched into the heart of darkness. October 16, 1941. The last transport ship carrying the wounded and elite units departed Odessa, bound for Sevastopol across the Black Sea. Lyudmila sat on the swaying deck, clutching her rifle, its wooden stock worn smooth of paint. Her kill count stood at 187. Odessa was lost, but her war was just entering its bloodiest chapter. Sevastopol, a fortress of reinforced concrete and natural limestone caves, would become General von Manstein's nightmare and the place where Lyudmila would transcend into legend. By November 1941, temperatures plummeted, and the sea breeze whipped the coast with freezing sleet. The Germans deployed super-heavy artillery, including the monstrous Dora gun, attempting to physically erase the city from the map. Thousands of shells turned the earth into a mangled wasteland every day. Lyudmila's 25th Infantry Division was deployed to the very front of the line. To counter the Soviet sniper threat, the Germans brought in ace instructors from sniper schools in Berlin and Halle. Their objective was singular: hunt down Lyudmila. November 7th, a major Soviet holiday, but the front was silent with the breath of death. At 3 a.m., Lyudmila and her new observer crawled 400 meters through waist-deep snow, taking a position in the ruins of an abandoned water tower. Intelligence suggested a top-tier German sniper had picked off 3 Soviet company commanders in 3 days. He was a ghost, never firing twice from the same loophole. Lyudmila lay motionless in the rubble for 10 hours. To prevent her breath from revealing her position in the cold, she kept a piece of ice in her mouth. At 1:45 p.m., the sun shifted, casting light into a bombed-out house. Lyudmila noticed a tattered linen curtain. It moved unnaturally, contracting slightly against the direction of the wind. Someone was racking a bolt. She didn't fire. Instead, she signaled her observer to raise a Soviet helmet on a branch. The helmet peaked just above a broken wall. Less than 2 seconds later, crack, the helmet was struck dead on. In that split second, as the German sniper relaxed to confirm his kill, Lyudmila squeezed the trigger. The bullet pierced the gap in the curtain and buried itself between his eyes. She later wrote in her diary, "He was the most difficult opponent I ever faced. His only mistake was underestimating a woman's patience." As the siege intensified, Lyudmila's tactics became spectral. She began utilizing Sevastopol's complex drainage system, disappearing into a manhole in one district and resurfacing hundreds of meters behind German lines. This phantom style of warfare spread panic through the German ranks. Their radio broadcasts shifted from curses to hollow bribes, blaring through loudspeakers. "Lyudmila, come over to our side. We have endless chocolate and beautiful dresses for you." Her response was usually a bullet to the broadcaster's throat. The brutality peaked in early 1942. German air raids intensified, and Soviet supply lines were all but severed. During one engagement, Lyudmila was caught in a mortar barrage. A shell exploded less than 5 meters away, shrapnel tearing into her face and back. When her comrades dug her out of the dirt, she was covered in blood, but still gripping her rifle. In a primitive field hospital, doctors removed 4 shards of steel from her body. She refused to be evacuated, returning to the front after only 2 weeks of recovery. The injury didn't break her, it made her bloodthirsty. High-ranking German officers began appearing more frequently on her list. By May 1942, her confirmed kills climbed to 257. To kill her, the Germans used flamethrowers to incinerate every bush and ruin where she might hide. Lyudmila countered by hiding among charred piles of corpses, using the stench of death to mask her own scent. In the darkest days of the siege, her best friend Anna was crushed by a German tank while covering a civilian retreat. Victor, the observer who had once confessed his love for her, took a burst of lead to the chest to shield her. Lyudmila buried them herself. No headstones, just bloody stones. From that moment on, sniping was no longer a tactical mission. It was a personal vendetta. June 1942, the Germans launched their final assault. The Soviet High Command realized Sevastopol could no longer hold. To protect Lyudmila, now a national totem of defiance, Stalin personally ordered her evacuation by submarine. When 2 NKVD agents forcibly escorted her to the sub, Lyudmila was in tears. She wanted to stay and die with her division. By then, her record stood at a staggering 309 kills, including 36 of the enemy's finest snipers. August 1942. Lyudmila was dispatched to the United States for a diplomatic visit. It was a bizarre spectacle in the history of warfare. A woman in a Soviet uniform, her gaze cold and piercing, standing under the blinding spotlights of Washington and New York. Initially, the American media was rife with gender bias. Reporters lobbed questions like, "Is the length of your skirt regulation?" And, "Do you wear makeup while you're out killing?" Lyudmila responded with a chilling calm. "Gentlemen, I am 25 years old, and I have already killed 309 fascist invaders. Don't you think you have been hiding behind my back for long enough?" Her words struck the rowdy press conference into a deathly silence. Then a thunderous roar of applause erupted. She formed a deep bond with Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife of Franklin D. Roosevelt, and the 2 women toured across America. Lyudmila delivered speeches calling for the United States to open a second front in Europe. Although some American skeptics at the time questioned her record, suspecting Soviet propaganda, Lyudmila silenced every doubter the moment she stepped onto a firing range, effortlessly demonstrating her lethal precision. After the war, Lyudmila did not remain in the military to enjoy a life of privilege. She returned to Kyiv University, completed her studies, and became a historian. However, the scars of war never truly healed. Due to her numerous wounds and long hours spent lying in damp, freezing earth, her health deteriorated rapidly. She was frequently haunted by nightmares, waking in the middle of the night to the hellfire of Sevastopol and the shattered remains of her comrades. On October 27, 1974, the Lady Death, who once struck terror into the hearts of the Nazis, passed away in Moscow at the age of 58. The Soviet Union honored her with a grand state funeral, and she was laid to rest in the prestigious WWII cemetery. To this day, in the military museums of Russia and Ukraine, that very Mosin Nagant rifle with its optical sight remains on display. The greatness of Lyudmila Pavlichenko lies not just in the cold figure of 309 kills, but in her proof that under extreme survival pressure, human will can transcend the limits of physiology and gender. She didn't just change the tactical logic of sniper warfare in World War II. She used her rifle to win dignity for the millions of Soviet women who suffered during that catastrophe. Her tactical philosophy, proactive hunting, the use of live decoys, and psychological deterrence is still regarded as a textbook for sniper operations by special forces around the world today. That's it for today's story. If this hardcore piece of military history made you feel the brutality of war and the weight of courage, please subscribe to our channel. We will continue to reveal more untold archives from the battlefield. Until next time.